because this is a movie that if you watch multiple times, there's so much you can see. Like I was really,
Midwife. That's what I was thinking of.
I love when you just leave the podcast for minutes at a time to Google. It's my favorite thing you do.
I finally watched. I finally watched. I finally watched. I finally watched. I finally watched.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
And this is David, and today we are finally watching again Children of Men. It's December, so we're doing movies we've already seen because we want to. And that's really the reason why.
Except for Christmas Day.
Oh yeah, that's just because you wanted to do Rocky. We were gonna do Kiss Kiss Bang Bang 2, but then Christmas Day is a Monday, and that's when we release. I think this might be my favorite dystopian movie.
It's good.
I remember exactly how I watched this movie. I used to have my computer sitting on my desk right next to my bed, and I would watch stuff to go to sleep. I remember I watched like episodes of Scrubs and Futurama.
Porn.
I didn't do that to go to sleep. That was like an aperitif before I started to go to sleep. And I had this on, and I started it probably at like 2:30 in the morning, and I finished it at like 4:30, and I just stayed up. And as I finished it, I then went into the extras and started watching like the making of documentaries on the DVD, and I watched the whole thing. It's like probably one of the most memorable like behind the scenes like footage bullshit that I've watched like on one of these movies. Which you look at the extras of movies, you're like, oh, look at that, look at that. It's like I don't have time to watch any of that, but I watched this one and like how they did the car scene where spoiler, Julianne Moore gets killed.
Yep.
How they did like the oneers for like all the different scenes, and it's just like really stuck with me. There was so much more that I picked up this time from this movie, and I think especially after having seen some of Alfonso Cuarón's like other work, like Roma, kind of like the themes are not
The
laid
themes
on
in Roma and this are so like together.
Absolutely. Like it my wife and I also, we used to listen to Hamilton and a lot, and then we hadn't for a while because you listen to something too much, and just like we were listening to it the other day, and like the immigrants get the job done line, like it always like sticks out, and it's like that's what like this movie's about too, kind of. But this movie is just like everything about it is so great. Like there's just so many aspects of it that like the story's great, right? But then there's just so many sections of like B-roll basically where like, someone would just have like a cool shot to like go from one scene to the other. And instead
hold
hold on,
on.
I'm not done. But he uses those shots to like just establish this like the time that we're living in, right? Like the kind of like the Gestapo tactics used by the UK in this futuristic society where it's like you're kind of looking at like a 1945, 1944 like Germany ripoff of like how they treated people.
It really reminded me of that Orson Welles like Big Brother's watching you sort of thing. And even like if you've seen John Carpenter's They Live, where like the big signs that once he puts on the glasses, they're like conform, unite, but it's not like subliminal here. It's like in your face here. Like the government has completely taken over. And I love how in the beginning of this, it's like Britain is the last standing country that has their shit together.
Also reminds me like V for Vendetta is the exact same thing.
Yes, exactly. It's how many of these dystopian movies are being like centered around the Brits?
I think 2. We've got 2 right now. I don't know. There's probably more, but those are the
There's a lot more. There's a lot more.
Well, also these both came out 06, right?
The Children of Men, yes, and
V for Vendetta, I'm pretty sure came out. It's either late 05 or early 06. But yeah, that's one of those ones you don't think about. When you have
late
like,
05.
Your Deep Impact, Armageddons, and stuff like that. Like these two movies are very different, but also
what's that
just
other
like,
one? White House Down and Olympus Has Fallen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Olympus Has Fallen spawned like 2 sequels too. Um, I don't know. This movie, like, you know, you have the filmmaking aspect of it, which is obviously like phenomenal, and just like it's one of those things that's showy, but also just like so impressive, and like it doesn't distract from the movie; it adds to it. It
Yeah.
makes you feel as if you're a part of it. The
You
like the
know,
filmmaking of it.
Alfonso Cuarón also did Prisoner of Azkaban, which is kind of funny because it's about like repression and like unjustified imprisonment and stuff like that. And what he did too is like if you watch the Harry Potter series, Prisoner of Azkaban feels so different from the entire rest of the series.
It's also like the
And
best. It's the best movie of the
it
series.
is like one of yes, I agree. But when you look at like when Harry Potter and Ron get on the train, or when they are doing those establishing shots of like um Azkaban,
Hmm.
it does similar to what you're saying, these like establishing shots in this movie, where as it pans to establish where you are, it's also showing like vital information about what society and what the people are like. I know one that sticks with me in Children of Men is when they show the dead cows, like the burning of the cows in the
Right.
field. And you don't quite know what that means until you kind of understand like the government and the bombings are kind of framing the rebels and sort of things. So it's like, is the government setting fire to this like the farmland, the farm animals to like chokehold the people to not get like the nutrition that they need? So it like it without explaining it all to you and like wording it out, it lets you view these images and then let you like create the story in your head.
Right. And the movie doesn't come out and say like, "Hey, the government's bad, the fishes are bad, everyone's bad." It just lets you kind of get to that point sort of organically of like
Yeah.
one of the quotes from Quaron is like there were certain things he didn't want to explain in this movie, and he's like I hate expository filmmaking. He's like, and this movie does a
Me and
good
him,
job.
man. Me and him.
It does a good job, like just the cows, right? That's such a small thing, but like it could have just been like those cows were diseased, right? And like they're keeping the disease out of, you know, England, out of
Yeah.
London. They're trying to save their people. Or it could have been you're right, like they're trying to limit the food because they want to starve out the refugees. And even like the way they treat the refugees is horrible throughout, but you slowly but surely see it get worse until the one image where Miriam gets pulled off the bus at the very end and they
Yeah.
put a black bag over her and you see like black bags over everyone and there's this like there's kind of an homage to like this famous like Abu Ghraib image. But then as you're like passing through, you just see dead bodies. And it's like, "Oh, they're about to just kill these people because they're like we don't have enough room. We just have to start murdering people."
It's kind of crazy too, and I want to talk extensively more about that scene when we get there. But I think just let's just kind of get started because when you start out with this, and I knew it was coming, but I watched it with my wife and her sisters, and um I when he's in the coffee shop and you learn of the youngest person in the world that just died because someone murdered him. And another thing, a great theme about this too, is like everyone's downfall, like humanity's downfall, society's downfall, it's all caused by the people who it affects. So like the youngest person in the world dies not by any natural circumstance, but is murdered. But the murder isn't like broadcast. It's just the fact that he died. And I think that's like the whole theme of the movie is like none of these people blame themselves for what has happened. They like to blame like a third external force, God or whatever.
Well, and also, you know, the movie doesn't go into great detail about like these other forces that are like killing people, right? You know, we get the fact that there was like a flu pandemic that took the main character's son. Um, but it kind of feels like for most of the movie, it's like something's bad has happened, which is people are unable to have children anymore, and it's caused society to crumble, right? And
Yeah.
it's not caused by really anything, or it's not caused by like one group of people that need to be attacked. It's not like we need to go after the Polish or something, right? It's like this is a thing that has happened to everyone. There really isn't someone to blame, but
And yet,
it causes anarchy and
and
causes people to kill each other.
one of the great things about this film too is that there's a secret pregnant woman at the center of all of this, and she has a child, and the child is to be kept secret, and to be kept secret because they believe, or at least like a faction believes, that if it gets out, it'll cause more anarchy and more craziness and everything like that. And we'll talk about that when that, towards the end of the movie, but spoiler alert, it doesn't, right? It like creates a moment of peace for a second. And I think that's just interesting how why would they think it? They think that anything that goes against the status quo would immediately result in some sort of like war or violence.
You know what all of these movies make me think now, where like it shows like something like this happening and people freak out and it causes society to collapse. It makes me think about like all the recent revelations of like UFOs where the government's like, yeah, we don't even know what this is. And like videos being released and things like that. My brother is super into all of this and people just don't give a shit.
Yeah.
No one no one cares. And it feels like obviously children stop being born is bigger than that. But it does make me wonder if like people like, people are adaptive and are just like, oh, whatever, aliens, we're
Well,
not
I
having
mean, I
kids
know
anymore.
this is a bigger controversy than aliens, but with the 2020 pandemic, when everyone was like, yeah, you can't go outside anymore, it can't be like that, you obviously have a faction of people who are like, that's ridiculous, go fuck yourself. But then you have another faction of people who are like, yeah, okay. Like, so it's like, what can society get used to? It's like a litmus test of like, what's your compliancy to like being told what to do? Where do you draw the line?
I think there's also like a ton of other like psychological issues at play of like people wanting to be seen as doing what's right and other people being not wanting being told what to do and things like that. So let's get back to this though. The way that it reveals that like it's talking about this guy who died, this famous person, and you're like, he's the youngest person in the world at 18 years. It's just such a cool way if you go in blind to be like, oh shit, we haven't had kids in over 18 years.
Yeah.
And then one thing that I liked too is I was like doing the math on this. I had to rewind. So they said his exact age. It was like 18 years, 4 months, 20 days. And then they said now a woman is the youngest person. She was 18 years, 5 months, 11 days. So it's 3 weeks, give or take, right? And so it's like, there's a person born like every second or two. So like 3 weeks in between, it's like how many people weren't born.
Well, another really good example of that is when they end up in the rundown school towards
Yeah,
the end
Miriam.
of the movie.
I was about to bring this up. Yeah.
Yeah, Miriam explains like she's a wet nurse, right? Or she was before all of this. And so she like saw it happen firsthand where she had like 19, 20 babies in the nursery at once, and then 3 or 4, and then weeks went by before they had one. So she saw it like firsthand diminish. I think that's another cool thing about this movie is like, and like he said, he doesn't like explanatory filmmaking, but the way you can explain something bit by bit and piece by piece throughout the entirety of the movie before you get the full picture, I think that's a cool way of doing it.
Do you know what a wet nurse is?
They
breastfeed other women's babies. A woman employed to suckle another woman's child.
Maybe she did that on the side.
You just use that term willy nilly. Well,
I guess I was talking about like a fucking
just say nurse.
Nurse.
Well,
no, it's a specific nurse for the. Oh my god, it's gonna kill me now. What do you do when you have a
doula?
Baby? No. Fuck it. Whatever. It'll come to me later.
So what I loved about the part Miriam said is how like, oh, she just noticed the babies weren't coming. Then she called a cousin. Then they called someone in Australia. And like the way that I was thinking about that throughout the movie, like how would we realize that this was becoming an issue? And it's like the people that work in there like, oh yeah, there's like less babies right now. What's going on? And it's like the realization that society had to go through of figuring out like, hey, we're not having babies. Oh, there's a ton of miscarriages. Oh, the part where she was like, we were able to save some of these babies, right? Like,
yeah,
what we had to do, we had to like get them out early because it was, I don't know, highly interesting that aspect of it. And just the fact that it wasn't spoon fed to you, you had to like really glean it from this movie. Because this is a movie that if you watch multiple times, there's so much you can see. Like I was
midwife. That's what I was thinking of.
I love when you just leave the podcast for minutes at a time to Google. It's my favorite thing you do. But
Midwife.
if you go to the scene where you first meet Michael Caine, and then there's this like camera that sweeps over these newspapers, and there's like so much information in that
Yeah.
that you could get. This is the first time I realized that like the last newspaper on there is talking about his wife, Michael Caine's wife in the movie, being tortured. That's why she doesn't talk. That's why she's in a wheelchair.
Oh, I missed that.
MI5 tortured her because she was questioning the torture and like uh, detainees, people being detained. She started questioning that, and so they took her and tortured her.
Interesting.
It's just like so much little stuff you don't. And what's great about it is you don't need to know any of that. It just adds to it.
The only thing that you really are supposed to pick up from like that scan of the newspapers in Michael Caine's house is that Clive Owen and Julianne Moore were married. They're a couple, and they had a kid.
There's another interesting thing too, and we'll just get back to doing this in order, but I think this is important now. So one of the fish guys named Ian, I think he's I was gonna guess his nationality, but that seems like a weird thing to do. Anyway, he's a darker man, Southeast Asian, but anyway.
Oh my god, keep going.
So at one, like, the fish eventually find Michael Caine's compound after Clive Owen escapes, and it's kind of a like, oh, how would they know that? But apparently, the guy that plays Ian is behind Clive Owen on the train when he goes out and meets Michael Caine and goes to the house. So they were following him from the beginning of the movie.
The white guy with dreads said that they've been following him too.
Right, Patrick.
Yeah.
Charlie Hunnam. Did you know that was Charlie Hunnam?
That's Charlie Hunnam?
Yes.
Oh, that's fucking insane.
Yeah. Well, because you never see his face really up close, and then the dreads hide it too. Also, Miriam having dreads too, I thought was fun, like a nice touch. When he walks out of the coffee shop and you see like these 3-wheeled motorized rickshaws and just like, I don't know, the futuristic, it like looked futuristic, but almost looked like steampunkish, and just, I don't know. I loved the design of everything.
The way it's done is so smart because it's not that far into the future.
Right.
It's 20 years into the future from like the time that this movie came out, in 21 years. So it takes place in 2027, which is not far from us at all. But it's almost like we kind of have that. Like we kind of have the weird motorized vehicles and like the TV screens everywhere, but not to like the dystopian extent of it. When he gets the coffee, a line that I missed earlier, like when I watched this a long time ago, that I really appreciate now is when I think it was Michael Caine who says, "Glad you're not a cream and sugar type of guy."
Mm-hmm.
And he means like if he lasted even like a second longer in that coffee shop, he also would have been caught in the explosion. And I just think like instead of saying, "Man, I'm glad you weren't in there a second longer because losing you would be really sad," like the dialogue in this movie is also just really clever. Yeah, I mean, this movie is just a brilliant take on like writing and plot wise, like storytelling. I want to get into like how this movie fucking ends. It's so beautiful, but even every step of the way, it's like it amazes me with just like the simplest form of dialogue. But I knew this scene was coming because it's probably one of the most famous scenes in this movie. It's the coffee shop blowing up with him like being right outside it. And so I was starting to turn down the volume because it was already really high. So I was starting to turn down the volume, and my wife was like, "Why are you turning down the volume?" I was like, "Just wait, just wait a second."
Yeah. That explosion happens. We have the ringing in the ears, which Julianne Moore explains later, like, oh, that's, you should enjoy that because it's the last time you'll ever hear that frequency. And then you have the ringing in the ear at the end of the movie when like
is that true?
Thought it was, but now I realize I think it is, but this is why I know that. I trust Quaron to not be feeding us bullshit,
Yeah. You're right.
So Clive Owen goes to work. He works at the Ministry of Energy, which is actually like an homage type thing to like 1984, like the ministries that run everything.
Well, also Harry Potter. It's the Ministry of Magic, which you end up being. I don't know why I'm such a Harry Potter fan in this episode, but that also ends up being like an oppressive government state too.
It does. It does. So everyone's crying at work except Clive. And then he just is like, I've really been affected by baby Diego's, can I go home and work? And Bosch just looks at him like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Um, and really, he could have been like, oh, I almost died an hour ago getting my coffee. So can I go home because of that? Um, so, he's taking a train out. We see the refugees being held in cages, and like I said, the V for Vendetta everywhere is shit but England. We get these news broadcasts while he's riding on the train. He goes to Michael Caine, who's a hippie that calls everyone amigo. Definitely a lot of pot use, which is not hidden from us. I love his line of like, I couldn't lose you and baby Diego in the same day. And he's like, baby Diego, that guy's a wanker. And Michael Caine's line of like, yes, but he's the youngest wanker in the world is like so fucking good.
Yeah. It's so funny because I feel like sometimes when you watch something, the cultural impact around you, like you notice more things about the movie you watched. And so I was on Twitter this morning or last night, and I haven't seen this movie in like years, but someone was asking like, what's the movie death that like still scars you today that you've seen? And someone posted Michael Caine in Children of Men. And I was like, yeah, that's a hard one.
Yeah, well, we can talk about it now. Michael Caine goes down like a fucking G. First of all,
he does.
Make sure his wife and dog don't feel any pain, whatever. Goes out there, does the pull my finger bit to these guys. I'm pretty sure he gets his finger shot off and fucking throws the finger at him. He throws his finger at Luke as a fuck you, and then gets shot again after throwing the finger, and then the other hand says, pull my finger again, and they kill him.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's nuts.
I imagine he probably took some pharmaceuticals so he didn't feel as much pain.
That's why he could throw his finger at him. The other crazy thing is that when he goes in there and you see his wife and him and his dog all asleep, and you think maybe he already killed himself or maybe they already got him, but they're all okay. That's like it's like a fuck you, man. For a second.
He fucking scared me. So there's these advertisements throughout the movie for a drug called Quietus.
Oh,
and they sort of allude to this. I barely noticed it too, but it's a suicide pill. Like the government is promoting through commercials suicide pills.
That's insane.
And so Michael Caine even mentions this. He's like, they'll give out suicide pills and antidepressants, but weed is still illegal in this country.
I thought he was being like exaggerative about it, but I guess not.
No, it's like, hey, we have too many people, so if you guys are depressed and like, well, you can kill yourself if you want.
No, it kind of makes sense that they wouldn't legalize weed because weed would like relieve your anxiety and make you a happier person. I mean, for the most part, but like, nah, don't do that. Like, don't feel that. Just die.
Yeah, it reminds me like the Futurama has the suicide machines on like different corners. And then they talk about the Human Project. Clive Owen is so like the arc he has in this movie is pretty great.
It's so great.
He's like such a cynical person in the beginning of this. He doesn't give a shit about anything. He's just like,
he smokes and he drinks and
he's biding his time through life, right? He's just like day by day, like going through, doesn't care about anyone. I guess needs money because he's a government worker. So like he's not making that much.
Well, what he does is kind of unclear. It's like, it's almost like when he was with Julianne Moore, they were like investigative reporters / like
activists.
Kind of activist. And then when his son died, they split up and he just became like a fluff piece journalist. Is that what he did?
No, I mean, he works for as I said, he works for the Ministry of Energy. I guess that's the building he walks in. So I don't know. He just probably like fucking does data entry or some bullshit. He doesn't make a lot of money.
We don't really see it either. Yeah.
Yeah. And then we see him go back to London and he's just sort of walking around, once again, like the London in this movie is just so brilliantly like done. Like, and this is when he gets pulled into the van.
What's in this movie is a lot of like secret CGI, like buildings and screens and stuff. Like everything that he's walking into that scene, everything in the forefront, like the staircase, is real, but then everything in the background is totally made up. But the way it's done, it's not like obvious. It's subtle.
Well, the baby at the end, I was like,
we'll talk about that later. But
no, let's just do it now. How, like, I was like, obviously that's a CGI baby, but I was like, it looks pretty like decent.
It's a full CGI baby, and I know back in 2006 it was like a marvel. Like it looked amazing back then. It still looks good now, but it's obvious now. I feel like back then people thought it was a real baby. And it's like, how would you get that small of a baby on a set, you know?
Yeah, no, people are probably like, what the fuck are you doing with a baby? Like that baby's
Yeah.
still covered in goo.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
so
but when he pulls it out of her and you see like the placenta come out too, like you see the liquid and everything come out, like it, man, the way they did that with the CGI, it's so good.
well, that was actually, I think, a little bit more practical. What they did is
But
they
it was a mix. It was a mix of CGI. Are you being funny?
no no. So they had her. They had a fake bottom of her, and they pulled a doll baby out, and then they digitally erased it and replaced it with a
Oh,
baby.
okay, yeah, okay. So it was a bit of practical and CGI, but it was so good.
That was really her
That was
vagina that they
yeah,
pulled that baby out
yeah,
of.
yeah, yeah.
So I love when she's like, we first meet Julian Moore. She's like, Theo, it's me, Julian, and he's like, and I get so it's been like 20 years since they've seen each other, right? But he's like looking at her, and you're like, oh, I guess does he not know who she is? She's like, yeah, of course you were my wife. We had a kid together. But he's like, you scared the shit out of me. Like, what are you doing? Um, and then he talks about like the bomb. And she's like, we don't bomb. And he's like, what about fucking Liverpool? She's like, okay, well, we don't bomb anymore. We we have decided not to bomb, and it's interesting because she's the leader of this group, and she's like, we don't bomb anymore. But as you find out through the rest of the movie, everyone else would still be willing to bomb.
Oh,
Like they
yeah,
would do
yeah, yeah.
bombs.
Well, another thing is too is like when he opens up, there's that great set piece of like the newspaper covered, um, like ticket booth or whatever they're in, because they're in
Yeah.
like an abandoned train station, which you later find out when they leave. And this movie's budget was only like something like $76 million.
Only.
I mean, that's not a lot for kind
No,
of how
I know.
big this movie is. That's not that much, but it made not even that back, which is kind of sad thinking about. And it's like it has like a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes, so it's kind of crazy how bad this movie did in the box office. Because it's not like one of those movies that's like kind of slow. This is a fast paced, for the most part, like action movie, and to do
Definitely
that
towards the end, yeah.
bad in the box office is just kind of surprising.
So she tells them, "Hey, we need transit papers for a girl." They don't give any explanation why. Um, and he says he can't do it, and she's like, "Well, we can give you 5K." And he's like, "What? I don't need money." And she's like, "We know that you need money." And I think this is a cool bit of foreshadowing. They take him and drop him off, and they throw coins at him for like a bus or whatever to get back home because they drop him off in a different spot. And you know he needs the money because he starts picking up the coins.
Yeah.
And so you also know because of that he's going to do this because it's five
Oh
thousand
yeah, yeah,
dollars.
yeah. That's good.
One of my favorite like subtle little scenes in this is him driving through the poorer areas of like central London to then like the posh areas to then this like I guess it's the arc of art that his cousin or whatever is like doing. And like the first time you meet his cousin who's played by Danny Houston, do you know what movie we've done of Danny Houston's?
I recognize him from the Wonder Woman movie, but what else have we?
30 Days of Night?
Oh, that's right. He's the main vampire guy.
Yeah.
Also, his son, I guess his son is like the one with the computer hand that doesn't talk. That he's from Gossip Girl.
Yeah. I recognized him from that, although I've not watched Gossip Girl. But we first see him in front of the statue of David.
The
And then he's
actual statue of David?
yeah, probably for the movie. That's where like 20 million of the budget went was to rent it. And then he's like, yeah,
And
we
it's
tried
missing
to
it's missing a leg. Sorry.
Yeah, I read something about how there was like it wasn't originally, but there was this article where they're talking about like art and they took out the leg for commentary purposes and they're like, "Oh, that's a good idea." And they did it in this movie. But then, he's talking about, "Oh, there's some Goyas that we got from Madrid, but we missed out on these." And he's like, "Just Madrid, what a clusterfuck." So this dude's job is just to go around kind of like England's been doing for centuries is to go like steal art from other people to make sure they save it.
Yeah. And what's crazy too is like Clive Owen puts up the line. He's like, why does anyone care? Like in 100 years, no one's going to be around to appreciate this shit.
He's like, I just try not to think about that.
But it's true, and you don't really think of that too. It's like really depressing that the only reason like we keep art and like preserve art is for future generations to like learn about the past and appreciate the past culture. And if we know for sure that there's not going to be a future generation, then what would be the point of that?
Right. So he immediately asks his cousin for papers, and he says it's because of a girl he met and the dad, and he needs to take the dad to the coast because he's sick, which I don't know. It's all bullshit, obviously, and sounds like bullshit. But then when he meets Luke at the bar, who's played by Chiwetel Ejiofor, and I want to say
Yep.
his name correct this time
Good job.
because an inside man, I don't know which one of us fucked it up. I was too embarrassed to go back and listen to it, but one of us apparently said his name very poorly. So,
Yeah, and
he,
you can go back and listen to our Inside Man episode to see which one that was.
which came out the same year and starred Chiwetel and Clive, both in it.
Oh, yeah. See, I want to talk to you about something. Clive Owen as an actor, I really like him in everything he's done. I
Right?
think sometimes he does like the Jason Statham route, and he does like a cheap action movie just for a
Are you talking about
paycheck,
Shoot
sort
'Em
of.
Up? Are we talking about Shoot
I'm
'Em Up?
talking about shoot 'em up. I'm talking about, well, like for Jason Statham, I'm talking about what's it called? Crash?
Crank, but I heard like I liked
Crank.
Crank, and then Crank's actually like a lot of people have said Crank's actually got some stuff behind it. It's not just
Okay, whatever. But my point is that I feel like Clive Owen has had like a major drop off because he was so good in so many things. He could have been like the next Tom Hardy if he had a better agent, maybe, or maybe he just didn't want to do it. I don't know what the whole thing with uh, Clive is, but yeah, or maybe he could have been like a Gerard Butler. But Gerard Butler also has kind of had a drop off lately, so
I think he's I mean, I
I don't
think
know.
you're right that he made a lot of bad decisions. I know he's done some like TV work that I think was pretty good, but yeah, I mean, to me it started out with The International and Duplicity. I think weren't received very well, which is like right after. So he does Inside Man, Children of Men back to back, then Shoot 'Em Up, which I actually like. It's kind of a very stylized action movie.
I think I've
Just
seen it.
a shoot you have or haven't.
I think I have.
But then International Duplicity, Killer Elite.
Think I've seen those too. My dad was a big Clive Owen guy. Like he used to watch his movies. I used to be little and watch it with him. Too little to quite understand.
Yes, I don't know. I agree with you the fall off, but I do think he has done some good like TV work that people really like. I don't. Oh, The Nick is what I was thinking of. So
He should. Oh yeah, the Nick. I heard of that. He should come back. He should come back to movies and be. I don't know. Be better. Be
so he just is in a movie called oh it's like a I think this is like it's a TV miniseries that I think is like a I think it's like a female Sherlock Holmes type thing, A Murder at the End of the World, which people say is really good.
oh,
But previous to that, in 2021, he was in American Crime Story, and he played William Jefferson Clinton, which is sounds pretty awesome. But once again,
that's true. He did play Bill Clinton in that. I didn't see it. I watched the OJ one and I thought it was really good. And then I heard that they were coming up with the thing, but I lost interest. Oh, and then between the OJ and the Clinton one, they did the Versace one.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's move back. So he tells Luke Chiwetel Ejiofor, I'm gonna fucking nail that name every time.
You can call him Luke. It's fine.
That he can only get joint papers, so I'll need some extra money. And then the next day we see him at like a grounds making bets, right? Like at a track. And this woman like kind of signals to him like, "Hey, you need to come this way." And he has to go settle his bets first. Like you can tell like this dude is just like gives into all these like addictions, right? Gambling, drinking, smoking, whatever. So then he follows the lady and he meets up with Julianne Moore, and you can kind of tell there's still love there. And you're like, for a second, you're like, why did these? I mean, yeah, I get your son, but why did you two? You couldn't make it. And then she's like, you have his eyes, and he's like, how is it so fucking easy for you? And then they start yelling at each other. And you're like, okay, never mind, I get it. It makes sense.
He's like, it's just like you to walk away from the conversation. And she's like, this is our stop.
Yep. And then they get in the car, and I love the first stuff from Key where she's like, "What the fuck are you looking at?" And he's like, "Oh, I guess the pleasure is all mine." And he's like, "Yeah, if this is gonna be uneventful, I'm gonna take a nap." And dude, and then when he wakes up, I mean, this is probably the first big oneer. It's one of my favorite scenes. From watching the behind the scenes about how they do this. They have just a camera in the car with the windshield that can come off so that the camera can move out. It can pan all the way around and see everyone. It's just like when you see how it was done, it makes the scene that much more brilliant.
Yeah.
But it starts so light, right? Like they're shooting the ping pong back and forth into each other's mouth, and she's like, "I'll let you know, no one was ever able to do this with me."
Every time it's so high anxiety because I don't know when they're going to attack.
Right.
And I'm always thinking that when they shoot the ping pong ball in her mouth, the bullet's gonna fly and the blood's gonna squirt out. I was like, oh my God. No, the car on fire comes down the hill first, which is the warning sign. And then when you see all the motorcycle guys come to the side and they start reversing, pulling in reverse. Yeah, it almost feels like, I know it's more to it than this, but the camera's on a lazy Susan and it's just spinning around.
Yeah, no, I mean it's kind of what it feels like, but obviously it's definitely more than that. Yeah, I mean I think Julianne Moore's death too is kind of a pretty shocking one. It's not really something you expect to happen that way and that
Because they're
quickly.
holding her but she's actively dying as they're trying to also escape.
Yep. And so as there's this one part after the bike shoots her, the bike comes up and he's holding the gun at Clive Owen for kind of a few seconds. And you're like, well, he could just have the shot. But you realize from that angle, Key is
They
in
could
danger.
yeah.
And that's why he can't do it, which actually comes up later too. And when he knocks the bike off, I think it's funny later on how pissed Charlie Hunnam is about that when it's like, you were trying to kill him. Why are you so angry that he didn't die?
It's even funnier because Charlie Hunnam's character again then gets hit by that same door later
Right.
on. The same move took him out twice.
Right. So they go to this. Oh, I almost forgot to say this part. So the cops drive by and the cops pull them over. And I was like, I don't remember how they get out of this. And then fucking Luke kills both of them. And you're like, oh shit. And I think this is the first time I noticed Chiwetel Ejiofor, how well that character is developed too, right? Because he's just this kind of quiet second lead to Julianne Moore in this group. And then that scene sort of sets off he takes over as the leader. The scene where Charlie Hunnam comes with the biker and he's like, all right, we'll try and save your cousin. Da, da, da. And then he pulls the gun on him. He's like, if you break protocol again, I'll fucking kill you.
What is crazy is that Luke, the character, is a really good actor too, because he even seemed surprised that Julianne Moore was dying next to him. But apparently, as it's revealed, it was all planned. And I like everything that happens in that farmhouse thing where Key invites him to know that she's pregnant.
Right.
And the imagery with all the cows surrounding her and they're being milked. It's a very it almost feels like a biblical reference. I just can't tell you which one. It just feels very in the moment. And another thing about this whole movie, the theme of this movie, is how all the animals are in this movie interact with Clive Owen's character. It's they all seem to like him. The dogs like him. The cat's trying to climb up his trousers.
Right.
All these animals are drawn to him for some reason. And then just the animals that are just in the movie. It's another thing is they didn't, and I think this is maybe part of it, they didn't know what caused the infertility, right?
Yeah.
But they're maybe it's radiation or stuff. If it was radiation, it would affect the animals too. So it couldn't have been. It had to have been something very human based.
I don't know. I'm not a vet.
I wonder, and I'm not trying to get too political here,
Oh my God.
but I wonder if they set up the whole Clive Owen, Julianne Moore's child dying of the flu, if there was some sort of vaccine to the flu that caused the infertility.
Well, I don't know. Then like Corone decided not to get into any of that.
Yeah.
There's a book you can read.
Yeah, that's true. It is based on a book.
The scene where she shows that he's pregnant and he's like, holy shit, that's a baby. And then like Luke comes in and he's like, holy fuck, that's a baby. And he's like, yeah, now you know what is at stake. Also, her whole line before about, they cut off the cow's tits. They have 8, but the machines are only 4. She's like, why don't they make a machine with 8?
Yeah.
Which is partly like that whole thing about how they're trying to keep the production of food down to only serve certain people. They're trying to starve out the other people. They don't want to make too much food, but I don't know. So they have the meeting where they're trying to like decide what to do, and he's like, Key, maybe you should have the baby here. And then Clive just spouts out, make it public, and everyone it just disdains that he's here and that he knows now. They're just like, boo, that's a bad idea. What are you talking about? They'll take her baby.
It's actually a brilliant idea.
It is. It is right. He, in the moment, feels like an idiot because everyone shoots it down. But when all the people at the end see the baby, everyone just stops because they realize how important this is.
Yeah. It's such a good moment. But anyway, so Clive Owen wakes up in the middle of the night. He just so happens to wakes up at the proper time when Patrick is coming back on the motorcycle.
No, the motorcycle. I think the motorcycle wakes him up because it's so loud.
Oh, okay. Well, anyways, Patrick is also very loud and yelly, and he wants to kill Clive Owen because apparently so it's revealed that the whole thing is set up by the fishermen, or the fishes, fish. Right? The fishes. They call them fishes. But they're set up by the fishes. And that attack that killed Julianne Moore was an inside job set up by Luke, who's now the head of the. And also, there's another faction called the Uprising, which I think Luke is actually head of. So they try to like turn the fishes into the Uprising.
The Uprising isn't a group; it's like a movement that the fishes want to happen.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever. Same thing. And so now Patrick wants to kill Clive Owen because he's. He killed his brother that was on the motorcycle. That
cousin, my fucking cousin. He was 19.
Okay, whatever. Anyways, he hears this and he's like, I got to get the fuck out of here. And because of the conversation he had with Key and how much Julianne Moore trusted him, Key trusts him. So he knows he can get Key to come with him without any question.
Because Miriam tries to stop it and Key's like, hey, I'm going with him. You can join if you want.
A while, it makes you think whose side Miriam is on, really.
But she doesn't trust Theo, but because of what Julian has, Julian is like the Oracle or whatever for the Human Project. She's the mirror. She's the mirror that can talk to the Human Project. So that's one reason Key trusts her. And 2, there's just this rapport that's been built, and Key was told by Julian, if anything goes bad, because Julian could kind of sense that it might, this is the person you trust. Like, this is the person you turn to next.
And it's a good thing too, because you can't trust Luke.
And it's funny too. I get like Julianne Moore's death is kind of the inciting incident that turns Clive around. You know what I mean? Losing her.
It's beginning to turn him around. He has that moment in the forest where he cries, and then but yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
I also Clive Owen comes in, and it's not like, hey, you're in danger. It's like, hey, they're gonna kill me, bitch. We got to get out of here. It's like all about him. He's not lying at all. He's like, we have to get out of here. They're gonna kill me.
Yeah. I like too, like, he's going to the car. I thought he was checking which car he could like hotwire, but he knew which car he could hotwire. What he was doing is he was disabling all the other cars so that they couldn't follow him. And then that reveal where the camera pans and it shows Key and Miriam right behind him. I was like, oh shit, they're like right there with him. So
I think what's funny is I think he was just he was disabling the cars and then taking the one in front. And then he gets to the one in front and he's like, oh fuck, this is the one that can't start. It needs a push start. And he's like, ah shit, I chose the one.
Oh yeah. Because he couldn't. Yeah, that's smart too. Because of course he would want the one that has no cars ahead of it, right?
Right.
So I love when like both of them are push start, but they don't realize that he took out like the I think he took out the brake line or the starter line, and he it just keeps going down the hill. Charlie Hunnam is next to him. He's like, I got a clean shot. As he's saying it, the door flies open, hits him on the head again.
Yeah, it was Key. I think it was Key that did that.
No, I think it was Clyde. I think it was Theo.
doesn't matter. Well, Key says, "Get the fuck out of here," or something like that as he does it. What's funny is he doesn't shoot. He's like, "I have a clean shot. Can I take it?" Because just 2 hours early, an hour earlier, 30 minutes earlier, Luke told him, "If you fuck up again, I will kill you."
Yeah.
So before that, like without that, he might have just shot him, which would have been the right thing to do, right? He might have shot him, killed him, and then they could have, gotten the girls or whatever. But he's like, I don't want to die. I don't want to die at all.
Yeah.
And then when they finally get this scene is there's such tension in the scene, even though you figure they have to get away, right? But when it gets down to the end of the hill, and then he has to push it to get going, and then Miriam sort of takes off a little bit, and Key's like, "Stop! We need him to come with us." And then they get away as Luke is chasing after them in the background. I don't know, it's just such a good scene.
So we talk about this a little bit when he gets to Michael Caine's house afterwards, and the fake out of his whole family's dead. But and we talked about Michael Caine's death and what he did to his wife and his dog. But there's a line from Miriam where they're pulling away. He witnesses his death, and Miriam says something like, "We have to think of the bigger picture." And I guess you could take that two ways, but I think the way you're supposed to take it is like Miriam at this point is like, "Look, there's going to be casualties along this trip. I might die, you might die, but the important thing is that we got to get her to the Human Project because humanity is basically doomed if we don't." And so, like, you can be sad about Michael Caine's death, but honestly, he died for like the greater good.
Well, and Michael Caine would agree with that too, right? He knew he was sacrificing himself when he told them, "Hey, we're not bringing her along. You don't need to do that." Yeah, because he's like, they see Michael Caine get shot to death, and he's like, "What's the good in that?" Like, like yelling at her first, and she's like, "You have to think of the greater good," or whatever she says. And yeah, Michael Caine is the one that comes up with the idea. I think they were initially going to go to one place, and then like, "Oh, well, Brex Hill in 2 days," and he's like, "Oh, amigo, I have it," and he talks to the guy he sells weed to, and
Yeah.
can get them. He's like, "We're going to break into prison." He's like, "Who would have thought of that?"
And then Key's like, "Bloody brilliant." Like, I love it. But the whole plan to break into the prison is really smart. And then the weird little prison guard Sid that Michael Caine is friends with. It's also funny that Michael Caine's name is Javier, even though there's no, like, you look at Michael Caine and there's absolutely no Hispanic Spanish lineage in him.
Is that why he calls people amigo? I did not know his name was Javier because I just am like, "Oh, there's Michael Caine."
Yeah.
Before this, I would do like when the alarms go off everywhere and you hear like the very loud music and you can see them kind of breaking in. That whole scene is just, I don't know, it's shot so perfectly. It's edited so well together. They have these kind of establishing shots that they use throughout of like Michael Caine's home. It's like the same shot each time from like the same vantage point. And it kind of, I don't know, it's just the whole like set design of his place and the outside of it and how, like, I don't know, it's all like beautiful looking, like, but just interesting and just, I don't know, it's a great location.
It's so
for this.
far and removed from the other set pieces. Like, it's surrounded by nature and it's very like this like cottage core sort of vibe, but you have everything else about this movie being very industrial and like urban.
Yep.
And I think that's refreshing too. You also don't know quite what he's doing. You kind of guess that he's gonna kill her and the dog, but then when the rebels come back out of the house and they're like, "There's a dead woman in there," they're like, "Yeah, of course." I thought Michael Caine's like, "I got this whole place fucking rigged to blow." He's like, "Adios, amigo," and then he just like blows up the whole.
What if he says, "Pull
thing.
my finger," and when he does it, it just
Oh
explodes?
Yeah, that's good. That's
Yeah,
good. Well, you can't have the confrontation of Luke and Patrick in the end, then,
Which is, there's a line in this that I don't think I realized because I had the subtitles on this time. But Patrick comes out and he's like, "There's a dead woman and a dog," and then he has like a map or something. He's like, "They're going to Brex Hill."
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
which is like how they know where to go after this. So they meet Sid, and Michael Caine told him to call Sid a fascist pig as like the password. And Sid gets out and he's like, "What the fuck did you just say to me?" And like pulls out his billy club and then just starts laughing. It's like, that's not a good joke. That's not. No one enjoys that but you.
I do want to say real quick that while they're waiting for Sid at this preschool, that's where the conversation where we find out Miriam's a midwife that like saw the um,
Decline
declining
in
of
fertility.
births. Yeah. So we get to the prison and we don't quite know what this is. Like I did not know that after they got through all the guards and the gates that they would basically be coming upon a city, like a prison city for the
Right.
refugees. But then Sid is like, go meet like an old gypsy woman by the statue. And I was like, there's a statue in this prison. But then when you get there, it all makes sense, you know?
Well, Brex Hill presumably is just a town that they've cordoned off into the prison, right?
Yeah, I understand that now.
Okay, good, gotcha.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, I what is interesting? So we already talked about Miriam getting pulled off the bus, the people that were just being killed and black bagged over their head.
Oh yeah, I guess this all leads up to before they get the gypsy. Yeah, because when they get to the gypsy, it's only the two of them.
So they meet Marichka, and before this, they had a bunch of people trying to sell them stuff and like, oh, I have a place you can stay, and it's like
Yeah,
kind of these people that have
panhandlers and
like
yeah.
commoditized like safety in this little area, and it shows that there is kind of like some bad people in this group have sort of like taken the misery of people and tried to make money off of it. But
Oh, am I not supposed to be calling her a gypsy?
you can apologize now, it's fine.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The Romanian woman, probably.
Yeah, yeah,
She
yeah.
was speaking but anyway, this movie definitely in this end part is definitely making the point of like the goodness and importance of immigrants, and like these are the most helpful people in the entire movie. They see this baby and they don't think we can do something with this, we can make money off of this, we can, there will be a reward or what. They're just like, oh my god, this has a baby, this is the first baby, we have to help this woman. And I think that's like obviously very purposeful in this movie, especially when you consider Cuarón's other movies. um I I think is interesting is, so they have the baby, right? We talked about the CGI of it. The next day, Sid comes back, and you're like, "Why the fuck is Sid here?" And then he like pulls out a gun, and and he sees the baby, and it's revealed he's like, "Sid watched the news and saw there's a lot of money for you," and it's like, "Oh, so you didn't like Michael Caine that much? You're gonna fuck over his people that he
Not
asked
only
you to help."
that, but he knows that the government's after them, and also the fishes are after them, and so he's like, I can get double rewards. You
Mm-hmm.
know.
Right. Um, and then Marichka, she had said, I guess in her language, like, don't go with this guy, you can't trust him. And then she beats him with like a leg bone.
I thought it was a ladle.
I don't know, fucking huge thing that she beats him with. Like
Yeah.
he shoots all his shots off. There's this door they have to escape through, and Marichka goes first, and she takes the baby, and then Keith thinks, "Oh my god, she's stealing my fucking baby." Um,
But she
but
stays.
she
She
stays right
stays.
there, helps them through. The shots like through the door as Clive Owen barely escapes, and then he picks up a battery as Sid sticks his head through, and he fucking kills Sid.
Yeah, and there's that moment of hesitation, and you're like, dude, run. But he's digesting the fact that he just killed someone. And
Yeah,
this
well,
is
and
like Clive Owen's character is not really like a killer fighter guy, right? He's like a guy who just kind of looks out for himself. So like he just killed someone for the first time.
yeah, yeah.
Well, he killed that guy who he kicked off the motorcycle, but he didn't really mean to do that.
Yeah, well, and that was self-defense. You couldn't get convicted of that. So then they walk through like there's a Muslim parade, and I think it's also interesting too. This isn't like they don't dwell on this, right? But the government obviously does. Everyone kind of agrees that the government is doing these bombings, and who they blame it on, either the fishes or the Muslims. So they walk through this parade, and I think it's a parade for like someone who's died, right? Because there's a body on a door. Um, and then Marichka takes them to this guy, and the scene where they Marichka's like, "Hey, show him the baby, show him the baby," and there's this guy through the window, and he sees the baby, and they're like immediately give them a place to stay. The one like soldier dude with the gun is like, "I found you a boat, we're leaving in 1 hour." Just like
And
the help.
the way that the older woman, who's like probably Mariska's mother or something, because you have that vanity that goes through all the photos, and you see Mariska like as a young woman on that vanity, so it's like part of her family or whatever. But they're all playing with the baby. Like they haven't seen or played with a baby since like Mariska was a baby, probably, right?
Yeah.
So
So then they leave, and from the point now, obviously, there's some digital manipulation to make it seem like one scene, but it is basically a one shot from when they leave that building to when they leave the exploding building where the army like stops to look at the baby is all like one take
it's like
basically.
1917. I didn't notice it. I need to rewatch it with like that in mind.
And what's interesting too is so the I guess the studio was very concerned about the shot because it took like 2 weeks to plan it out, and basically if the shot didn't work, it took 5 hours to reset it up to do it
Of
again.
course, of course. Well, it also depends like where the shot didn't work, right? Like if you're coming towards the end of it and someone trips, it's like fuck, dude, got to go all the way back.
And at one point they are filming it and blood spatter splatters on the lens of the camera.
Yeah.
And apparently at that point, just out of like habit, Quaron shouts cut. But the sound of like the gunshots and cannon shots drowned out him saying that. So they just kept going and they filmed the whole thing. And then afterwards, I guess the cinematographer helped like convince him like, hey, you just leave that in. And Quaron was like, I guess called it like a happy accident. He's like, it was not intended by me. I
I thought
almost
it was so
ruined it.
cool. I thought it was so cool because it's like you now feel like you're there with them. Like you have blood splatter on your face, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's just the fact that it just worked out that way is so great.
And it wasn't even so much blood splatter that it like you couldn't see, right? It was just like just enough to get it what it was.
Yeah, and the cinematographer was Emmanuel Lubezki, who also has won 3 Oscars, so he knows what the fuck he's talking about.
He's like, no, leave it, please, God. What's so great is it is such a big scene because they come out of that and they start running down the road, and then they get captured again by the fishes with Luke. And I like how Luke tells Patrick, like, don't kill them until we get around the corner because I don't want Key seeing. Probably not to like stress her out of her pregnancy. She loses the baby. Or no, she already had the baby at this point, right?
She did. Yeah, I think he just didn't. He wants. It makes things easier if she's not completely antagonistic to them because they don't.
That's true.
They will take that baby from her if need be.
Yeah, but it'd be easier if they could have her with the milk and everything.
Right? No, exactly. Because I mean, I don't. Could they even make formula right now? They haven't had
they
baby.
have all the cows.
Well, that's not. I don't. Yeah. Anyway, this scene I think is pretty. I was thinking about it today. So as Luke tells him, do them all, kill them, and Patrick Patrick shoots this random refugee guy who all he was doing was helping this baby, which is the same thing they wanted to do, right? He had no skin in the game. He didn't know the fishes were after them. None of this, right? He was just helping a woman and a baby. And the fish's whole goal is to make people see the importance of refugees and to treat them like people. And they just execute this refugee that was helping them with the baby.
That's kind of a beautiful thing, isn't it? Because in that moment it shows that that's what they say they do, but that's not what they really do.
Well, they've lost their way. They're more focused on. They're not focused on the people anymore. They're focused on like their idea of like winning, basically, right? They're like their ideological bent of like, this is what we have to do. We have to fight the government, and they're not even fighting for the people they were fighting for anymore, right? Because they're all English citizens, presumably. They don't, they're only on the run because they're terrorists. So
exactly. And they're about to shoot Mariska and then him, but then thank God the fucking government army comes in.
Everyone says it all the time, right? Thank the tanks rolled in. And the scene where he like goes through the bus and Patrick tries to shoot him again because Patrick's like, I have to kill this guy. He was saving Clive for last, and that's why Clive gets to live.
Mariska gets to live too. She gets away too.
Yeah, I mean, Mariska makes it the whole way, probably. She's probably still alive after Clive Owen.
Dude, it's really sad because she puts them on the boat and he's like, no, Mariska, come with us. And she's like, no, because Mariska, fucking MVP of the movie, she knows that they have a better chance of survival with less people. So she stays back with her dog. Way to go.
So Theo Clive Owen goes up into the building to find the baby. We get to see Charlie Hunnam killed, which is great. He hears the baby. Luke, Chiwetel Ejiofor, again, has put her right in the line of fire, right up against the
Stupid.
wall where they're
Right
shooting.
against the fucking window. Why would... Okay, whatever.
So then Theo tries to take her and he points the gun at them. He's like, no, we need him, Theo. We need the baby. And Theo's like, it's a girl. And there's this moment of realization on Luke's face of like, I wasn't even thinking about the baby as a baby anymore. It wasn't a person. It's just an idea. He couldn't even, he, when he finds Key and Theo, he doesn't even ask to see the baby. You know what I mean?
No.
He's like, oh, let me see the baby. No, he doesn't give a shit about this baby. It's like what the baby can do for the cause. And even in the end, like this realization, he still shoots at Theo when they try to escape. He's said this whole time, don't shoot in the direction of the baby. And he shoots in the direction of the baby because he's like, I have to win. Like he is like subtly, but not even subtly, like such an evil character in this movie.
Yeah, but he has that like bit of humanity. We don't get the catharticism, and we don't need it either, right? Like we see Patrick die, and that feels good to us as the audience because Patrick's a fucking idiot. But we don't see Luke die. We just know he's dead because he's in the same room that seconds later after Clive and the baby leave, it absolutely gets exploded to all hell.
Yeah.
But we don't see him like very personally die. I do want to talk about Theo's character arc because there's moments that I never noticed until this watch that I think is so good, so subtle, and just so fucking beautiful. The entire time, Theo, he's out for himself. Clive Owen has this cynical view of the world, and he's like, I just need to get from point A to B every day, and that's just what I'm living for. I lost my son, I lost my wife, who fucking cares, right? And then Julianne Moore dies, and you see a little bit of a turnaround. And then Michael Caine dies, his only last family, right? And then he's like, I have no reason to live. And then it's the baby. And the whole movie, Theo is smoking and drinking. And he gives up those two things, his two things that he enjoys most in the world. He gives them up for the baby. Mariska, or the guy who rents them the room, would not leave. Or I think might be Mariska, would not leave until she got a smoke. And he just hands her his entire pack of cigarettes. And then he empties the entire liquor bottle he's been carrying around to desanitize his hands to deliver this baby. And now he has given up everything he wants and likes in this world. And he's now like, just his whole thing is, I dedicate my life to seeing this through. And I think it's like one of the best arcs I've ever seen.
One of my favorite Clive Owen lines that we didn't talk about a while back is, this is the first baby in 18 years. You can't name it Froley.
I love what they decide to call the baby. I think I was like, of course you have to call the baby that. But then it's revealed that, oh no, it's not revealed yet. Mariska takes them to the boat finally, right? That's what happens.
They take him to the boat. They go out there. We finally figure out that Clive Owen has been shot.
Yeah.
Because originally Keith thinks, oh my God, I'm bleeding. He's like, no, it's me. And he's like, I'm fine.
And Luke shot him.
Yeah. And then he passes out. And like for a second, Keith's like, I'm stuck out here with a baby and no one to row this. I'm in the middle of the ocean. You know, they're very far out. When you see the planes that fly over and drop bombs, like they're miles out. She's like, I don't even, like, what would I do if this boat doesn't come and I'm just stuck out here with a baby? But then the boat does show up, right? Like this whole idea of like, in a movie that's very cynical, this like in the end, the human project exists and she's going to be safe. And Clive Owen is probably dead, but maybe lives, right? I don't know. It's just a very...
he's dead.
Okay, that's great. I'm glad you're, one, a doctor, but then two, were like on the boat with him checking his vitals.
It's a better movie if he dies.
Do you not remember Reservoir Dogs when they said a shot to the gut is the most painful, but you don't die from it right away? You just bleed out for days.
It is way more poetic if he dies.
I don't think the movie gives a fuck about your poetry. Like, it's unsaid if he lives or dies. He lived, damn it.
Well, however you want to cut it, they name the baby Dylan, which you know that's him and Julianne Moore's dead son's name. And then he gets that information, and then he passes away / passes out. I like to think he died. But yeah, they made it, and that's the end of the movie. And I'm just sitting there like, holy shit. The most incredible thing about this movie is that we talked about it for an hour and 5 minutes, and the whole movie is not that much longer than this.
It's like an hour 49, I think.
Yeah, 49.
Yeah.
But it packs in so much. Like you were talking about, even the establishing shots packs in so much information that you just feel like you're sitting through a 3-hour movie. Not in a bad way. Not like in a time-consuming slow way, but like the amount of information and the amount of like what you witness in this movie feels like you've lived a lifetime in there.
Yeah. The one thing I didn't talk about, one of the things I read was that the part where they pass like the hooded figures, when they're going through Brex Hill.
Oh yeah.
Patrick is in a hood. I think it's just probably like an Easter egg thing, but there's like a guy with like dreads that looks like it's probably Patrick.
Oh, how did he get to the end scene where he
died? That's the thing. I don't know. Maybe that was his way of sneaking in. But like, if you think about it, like also like a lot of people just had dreads in this futuristic society. I imagine because like, I don't know. It's probably like it was just easier to maintain that way. Like
Maybe.
Life was tough on the road. When I was watching the end of this movie to prepare for this, my wife was like, she's like, I want to watch that movie, but I do not know if I can handle it. And then she like asked me how it ends. And I was telling her, and then I'm watching it as I was cooking breakfast, and she kind of comes up behind me and she's watching it too. And I was like completely like choking up, like, almost had tears coming out. And then she's like, I haven't even seen this. I haven't been watching this and I'm choking up at this. Like I have no, I didn't have the buildup of this movie to this end part. And she's like, and this is affecting me. Yeah. But that scene, we didn't really cover it, where everyone in the building is looking at the baby. They're going downstairs. You see the fish, like gorilla fish guys coming up, and they see the baby and they like are looking at it. And then the army and the guy calls it the ceasefire, almost lost it. And then they just walk out the building and everyone's just staring at the baby. Oh my God.
Until a few moments pass and they all go right back to fighting again.
Yeah, but it was because like a bomb exploded for someone who wasn't looking at the baby. But yeah, they got brought back into like the reality of their situation. This movie is like so masterfully done. It's just amazing. And I think this is why we do December, so we can cover movies like this that we just both happen to have seen.
Exactly. And, thanks for listening to another episode of I Finally Watched. I'm Milan.
And this is David. And we just talked about Children of Men.
Just talked about it.
Chopped it up.